Mercer's world was a carefully constructed fortress of silence, and its most vulnerable gate was the passenger seat of his mother's rust-eaten 1998 Ford Fiesta, which coughed and sputtered its way towards the gleaming gates of Silverwood Academy. He sat rigid, a 17-year-old statue in his crisp, navy blue blazer, his eyes fixed on the looming spires of the most prestigious private school in the state. Every chug of the engine was a simple crash of humiliation. "You got your lunch, mijo?" Elena Mercer asked, her voice warm and textured, like well-worn cloth. It carried the soft, melodic lilt of her native Spanish, a sound that, in the echoing halls of Silverwood, felt to Leo like a blaring announcement of their difference. "Yes," he mumbled, the single syllable cutting the air. He clutched the brown paper bag, knowing it contained homemade tamales wrapped in banana leaves, their savory scent already seeping out, alien and pungent against the sterile, lemon-polished smell he associated with school. The car jolted to a stop a full block from the main entrance, as per their unspoken agreement. Leo's hand flew to the door handle. "Leo," Elena said, her tone gentle but firm. He paused, not turning. "Look at me." Reluctantly, he met her eyes. They were the color of rich, dark earth, crinkled at the corners from a lifetime of smiles and squinting under the sun. Her hair, streaked liberally with silver, was pulled into a practical but escaping bun. She wore her usual uniform, faded jeans, a simple floral blouse, and the thick-soled, supportive shoes she needed for her job. To Leo, in that moment, she was a mosaic of everything he wished he could sand away. The calloused hands, the faint, permanent scent of bleach and soil that clung to her, the way her whole face lit up when she saw him, oblivious to the social minefield she represented. "Have a good day, Corazon," she said, leaning over to kiss his cheek. He flinched, a tiny, involuntary spasm. "Don't, Mom, someone might see." The light in her eyes didn't dim, but it seemed to recede, like a lamp turned down a notch. She nodded, pulling back. "Go on, then, be brilliant." He escaped the car, slinging his designer backpack over his shoulder, a birthday gift from her, bought with who knows how many extra cleaning shifts, and merged into the stream of students arriving in Audis, Teslas, and Range Rovers. He didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen his mother sitting perfectly still for a long moment, one hand resting on the worn passenger seat he'd just vacated, before turning the coughing car around and heading towards her first job of the day. Silverwood was Leo's sanctuary and his purgatory. Here, he was not Leo, Elena's son. He was Leo Mercer, scholarship student, debate team star, aspiring architect with a portfolio that had already impressed visiting alumni. He had perfected the art of camouflage, the right brand of headphones, the carefully curated music taste, the neutral accent that held no trace of his bilingual home. His friends, Asher, whose father owned a tech empire, and Chloe, whose mother was a celebrated neurosurgeon, knew he was on scholarship, but he'd let them assume it was for academic merit alone, which it was, and allowed the vague implication that his parents were, in academia, or overseas development, to hang in the air, unchallenged. His real mother was his most fiercely guarded secret. When parent-teacher conferences came, he claimed she was working night shifts as a hospital administrator. When the school's annual fundraising gala required family attendance, he said she was unwell. He lived in terror of the day his two worlds would collide. That collision, he believed, happened on a Tuesday in late October. He was walking with Asher and Chloe past the school's manicured quad when he saw her. Not at the gate, but inside the hallowed grounds. She was kneeling by a flowerbed near the administrative wing, her back to them, wearing a gray uniform jacket with green thumb landscaping stitched on the back. She was digging diligently, transplanting winter pansies with a focus so intense it was like a force field. Leo's blood turned to ice. His feet rooted to the spot. "Who's that?" Chloe asked, wrinkling her nose slightly at the working woman's presence. "One of the groundkeepers, I guess," Asher said, uninterested. "Come on, we'll be late for chem." But Leo couldn't move. He willed her to be invisible. He prayed the earth would swallow her. And then, as if sensing the weight of his horrified stare, Elena Mercer turned. Her face broke into its sunrise of a smile, the one meant only for him. She raised a muddy hand in a small, tentative wave. Leo's response was a gut reaction, pure, unthinking self-preservation. He looked directly through her, his face a blank, cold slate, and turned to Asher. "Yeah, let's go, mister. Donovan will skin us alive." He walked away, feeling the heat of her gaze on his back like a physical brand. He didn't look back. The shame was a hot, sour taste in his mouth, but beneath it, colder and sharper, was a sickening twist of guilt. He carried it through his classes, a lead weight in his stomach that made the words of his teachers sound distant and meaningless. For 2 days, a glacial silence filled the small, tidy apartment Leo shared with his mother. It was a space filled with love made tangible. Crocheted blankets, photos of Leo at every age, shelves bowing under the weight of books from the secondhand store. The air usually carried the comforting smells of garlic, cumin, and simmering beans. Now, it just felt thin and cold. Elena moved through it quietly. She didn't confront him. She just made his favorite sopa de fideo and left it on the stove for him. She ironed his blazer. The care was still there, but it was offered from a distance, as if she were tending to a fragile, potentially dangerous creature. Leo, gnawed by his guilt, mistook her quiet for acquiescence. He told himself she understood. She knew the rules of Silverwood, the world he was trying to break into. She would want this for him, even if it hurt. The school's announcement, therefore, felt like a cosmic joke, a targeted strike from a malicious universe. It was delivered by Headmaster Whitaker over the crackling PA system during morning assembly. His patrician voice filled the hall. And so, in an effort to bridge the gap between theory and practice, to foster empathy and a true understanding of community, Silverwood Academy will be instituting a mandatory Community Impact Day. This is not a charity drive, students. It is an immersive experience. This Friday, all classes are suspended. You will be assigned, at random, to a local partner, a business, a nonprofit, a public service, and will work alongside the professionals there for the full day. Your reflections will form part of your final ethics grade. A murmur rippled through the student body. Some groaned, some looked intrigued. Leo felt a prickle of unease. The assignments were posted at noon. Leo scanned the list on the bulletin board, his name leaping out at him. Leonardo Mercer, partner, Green Thumb Landscaping and Groundskeeping. On-site supervisor, Elena Mercer. The world narrowed to that line of text. The chatter of students around him faded into a dull roar. Elena Mercer. They had used her full name. There was no ambiguity. He felt the walls of his carefully constructed fortress begin to shudder and crack. Asher, reading over his shoulder, let out a low whistle. Green Thumb, that's hardcore manual labor, mate. And hey, your supervisor has the same last name. Distant relative slumming it. He nudged Leo with a grin, completely missing the panic draining the color from his friend's face. Leo couldn't speak. He just walked away, the piece of paper with his assignment feeling like a verdict in his hand. He spent the next 48 hours in a state of cold dread. He considered feigning illness, but the ethics grade was a major component, and his scholarship required a flawless transcript. He was trapped. Friday dawned, bright and cruelly cheerful. Students gathered in the quad, dressed in old jeans and t-shirts, a bizarre costume party of the privileged playing at work. Leo stood apart, his own old clothes feeling like a shameful disguise. A familiar, rattling Ford Fiesta pulled up not to the student lot, but to the service entrance. Elena stepped out. She wasn't in her usual clothes. She wore her official Green Thumb uniform, khaki trousers, a polo shirt with the logo, and sturdy boots. Her hair was in its tight bun. She looked, for the first time in Leo's eyes at school, not like an intruder, but like someone who belonged there in a capacity he had never acknowledged. She held a clipboard. Headmaster Whitaker ushered a group of 6 students, including Leo, Asher, and a quietly observant Chloe, towards her. Mrs. Mercer will be your guide and supervisor today. Listen to her, learn from her, and try not to ruin any prize-winning hydrangeas. Elena's eyes found Leo's. There was no smile, no warmth, but no reproach either. Her gaze was professional, appraising. Good morning, she said, her voice clear and carrying. We have a full schedule. The rose garden by the south gate needs winter pruning. The courtyard fountain needs a full clean out before it freezes. And we have 2 truckloads of mulch to spread in the alumni memorial garden. We'll start with the roses. Follow me, please. She turned on her heel and walked, expecting them to follow. They did, a ragged little procession. Asher muttered to Leo, she's kind of intense, huh? The rose garden was a sprawling, intricate maze of thorns and dormant buds. Elena handed out thick leather gloves and pruning shears. She demonstrated the precise cut, angled, just above an outward-facing bud. You don't just chop, she explained, her hands moving with confident, economical grace. You listen to the plant. You see its shape, its desire for the sun. You cut away the dead, the diseased, the crowded, to give it life and air. A bad cut is a wound. A good cut is a promise of new growth. She made it sound like philosophy, like surgery. Leo, fumbling with his shears, watched her. He had never seen his mother in her element like this. Her movements were sure, her knowledge deep and unpretentious. She corrected Chloe's grip gently. She showed Asher how to identify a cane blight. Leo, trying to mimic her, snipped clumsily. A cane snapped back, scratching a deep red line across his forearm. Leo, Alina's professional facade cracked for a second. The familiar, worried endearment slipped out. She was at his side in an instant, taking his arm. You have to respect the thorn. Come, let's clean that. As she led him to the first aid kit on her truck, he heard a titter from one of the other students. His face burned. The day was a waking nightmare. It only got worse at the fountain, a slimy, algae-choked basin. Their task was to scoop out the murky water and decaying leaves. The smell was foul. Asher gagged dramatically. Chloe rolled up her sleeves and got to work, though her nose was wrinkled. Elena, without a word of complaint, pulled on waders and stepped into the deepest part. The filter's clogged here, she said, her voice echoing in the stone basin. It's usually the first thing to go. Hand me that wrench, Leo. He passed her the tool, avoiding her eyes. He saw her hands, submerged in the greenish water, working deftly at the rusted bolt. They were the hands that had held his when he was scared, that had cooked every meal he'd ever eaten, that worked until the knuckles were swollen and the skin was permanently etched with lines of labor. And here he was, ashamed of them. Lunch was a silent affair under a large oak tree. Elena sat a little apart, eating her own packed lunch, tamales, again. The smell, now mixed with the scent of damp earth and sweat, wafted over. Asher sniffed. What is that? It actually smells amazing. Elena looked up. Tamales de pollo con salsa verde. Would you like to try one? Asher, ever the adventurous foodie, accepted. Chloe, curious, took one too. Leo watched, paralyzed, as his friends bit into the food of his childhood. Oh my God, Asher moaned, his eyes wide. This is incredible, Mrs. Mercer, this is art. Chloe nodded, her mouth full. Seriously, what's in the sauce? Elena smiled, a real one this time, though her eyes flicked briefly to Leo's frozen face. Tomatillos, serranos, a little garlic. The secret is in the masa, the corn dough. You have to beat it until your arm aches, so it's light. You made this, from scratch? Chloe asked, incredulous. See, Elena said simply. It is cheaper, and better, than anything in a package. The afternoon was the mulch. Back-breaking, monotonous. Work, spreading dark, fragrant piles of wood chips around the flower beds. Leo worked in a furious, silent rage, heaving wheelbarrow loads, trying to outrun his own thoughts. During one trip, as he dumped a load near where Elena was expertly edging a bed with a sharp, half-moon tool, his wheelbarrow hit a rock and tipped, sending a cascade of mulch onto the pristine lawn she had just mowed. Cuidado, she snapped, the frustration finally breaking through. She stood up, wiping her forehead. Look at this mess. This is not just about moving dirt, Leo. It's about care. This lawn is a living thing. You treat it with respect, or you might as well not bother. It was the first time she had singled him out, corrected him directly in front of everyone. The dam inside him broke. Respect, he hissed, the word tearing from his throat. He didn't care who heard anymore. You want respect, for spreading dirt, for cleaning fountains. This isn't important. This is what people do when they have no other choices. The moment the words left his mouth, the world went silent. The chatter of birds, the distant sounds of other work groups, it all vanished. Asher and Chloe stared, open-mouthed. The other students froze. Elena looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound, devastating sadness that seemed to age her 10 years in an instant. The light in her earth-brown eyes didn't just dim, it was extinguished, replaced by a deep, weary hollow. She didn't say a word. She just slowly removed her gloves, folded them neatly, and placed them on her toolkit. She walked past him, her shoulders set in a straight, hard line, and went to speak to the other green thumb worker on the far side of the garden. Leo stood there, mulch on his shoes, his words hanging in the air like poison gas. He had done it. He had finally said the unsayable. And the look on her face was a punishment far worse than any humiliation he'd ever feared from his peers. Asher was the first to break the silence. Leo, he said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. What the hell is wrong with you? Chloe just looked at him with a new, chilling clarity. She's your mother, isn't she? Leo had no answer. He just stared at the spot where his mother had been standing, now empty save for the precise, beautiful edge she had cut into the soil. The ride home was a journey into the heart of a silence so complete it had a physical weight, pressing against Leo's eardrums. The Fiesta's usual rattles felt like gunshots. He stared out the window, watching the manicured estates around Silverwood give way to the modest, well-kept bungalows of their neighborhood, and finally to the aging brick facade of their apartment building. The fortress of his lies was now rubble, and he sat in the ruins, cold and exposed. Elena did not cry. She did not yell. She drove with a terrifying calm, her hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. When she parked and turned off the engine, the sudden quiet was deafening. Inside the apartment, she went straight to the small balcony where she kept her potted herbs, rosemary, thyme, cilantro struggling in the autumn chill. She began to tend to them, her back to him. It was her place of solace. Leo hovered in the living room, the words he had spoken at school now echoing back at him with their full, ugly force. This is what people do when they have no other choices. He saw again the light dying in her eyes. Mom, he began, his voice a croak. She didn't turn around. Go and wash up, Leo, she said, her voice flat, stripped of its melody. You smell of mulch. It was the most dismissive thing she had ever said to him. He retreated to the bathroom, scrubbing at the dirt under his nails, watching the brown water swirl down the drain, wishing he could wash away the last 3 hours just as easily. That night, for the first time he could remember, she did not cook. There were no comforting smells from the kitchen. She heated a can of soup and placed a bowl silently in front of him at the table before taking her own to her room and closing the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was a full stop. The next week was an exercise in desolation. Elena spoke to him only when necessary, in brief, functional sentences. Your laundry is on your bed. The rent is due Friday. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, her warmth absent. She worked longer hours, leaving before he woke and returning after he was often in his room. The home that had always been a refuge of unconditional love was now just a set of walls. At school, the fallout was different but just as severe. Asher was distant, his usual easy banter replaced with a cool, disapproving politeness. Chloe avoided him entirely. The story, of course, had spread. The scholarship kid who had publicly eviscerated his own mother, a hard-working woman, for her honest job. Whispers followed him in the halls. The looks were no longer of casual indifference but of active contempt. His social capital, built so painstakingly over 2 years, had evaporated overnight. He was a pariah, and he knew he deserved it. His only solace was the library, a cavernous, silent space where he could hide. It was there, 3 days after Community Impact Day, that he found the letter. It was tucked into his assigned ethics textbook, a plain envelope with his name written in his mother's graceful, looping script. His heart hammered against his ribs. He took it to the most isolated Carl and, with trembling hands, opened it. Leo, I am writing this because I cannot find the words to say to your face. The hurt is too close, and I fear my anger would say things I do not mean. What you said at your school did not surprise me. The wound of it did, deeply, but the sentiment, I have seen it growing in you for years. Every time you flinched from my kiss, every time you asked me to drop you a block away, every time you spun a story about my life to your friends, I felt it. I told myself it was just a phase, that you were navigating a world very different from our own. I told myself your love for me was underneath, like the roots of my plants, strong even if not seen. But on Friday, you showed me what you truly think of my life. Of my hands, of the work that put food in your mouth, clothes on your back, and yes, paid for the application fee to that very school. You called it unimportant. You said it was for people with no choices. Let me tell you about choices, mijo. I chose to leave my home, my family, my language, to come to this country when I was not much older than you are now. I chose to work 3 jobs so I could take night classes to improve my English. I chose to stand on my feet for 12 hours a day in a factory so I could afford a safer apartment when I found out I was pregnant with you. I chose to clean office buildings at night so I could be home with you during the day when you were small. I chose to take the job with Green Thumb because it allowed me to work outside, to make things grow, and to have a schedule that let me attend every one of your parent-teacher meetings at your old school. Every single day of my life has been a choice for you. A choice to give you a better chance. A choice to feed you not just food, but dignity and hope. The work I do is honest. It is skilled. It makes the world more beautiful and functional. It is a testament to perseverance. There is no shame in it. The only shame is in denying the love and sacrifice that fuels it. You are ashamed of me. But now, Leo, I must tell you a harder truth. I am ashamed of you. Not for being poor, not for being on scholarship, but for the poverty of your character. For the lack of compassion in your heart. For your belief that a person's worth is tied to their title or their bank account. I love you. You are my sun, my corazon, and that will never change. But I do not like the person you are becoming. And I cannot, and will not, stand by and be treated with contempt by my own child. Until you can look at me, and at yourself, and see the truth, we have nothing more to say. Do not expect the meals, the ironed clothes, the easy love. Those are for family who see each other, who respect each other. You have shown me I am not that to you. So I will stop being it. The apartment is paid through the month. There is food in the refrigerator. I will be staying with Tia Rosa for a while. Elena, the letter was not signed. Mom, it was signed. Elena. Leo read it 3 times. The words blurred, swimming in the tears he could no longer hold back. They fell onto the paper, smudging the ink of her name. A great, wrenching sob tore from his chest, there in the silent library. He clamped a hand over his mouth, his shoulders shaking. It was not a cry of self-pity, but of utter, devastating comprehension. He had not just insulted his mother, he had invalidated her entire life, her every struggle, her every triumph of spirit over circumstance. He had taken her boundless love and used it as a cloth to polish his own fragile ego. He was not just ashamed. He was disgusted with himself. He did not go home that night. He walked for hours, through neighborhoods both rich and poor, seeing the workers he had always invisibilized, the woman sorting recycling in the dim light of a truck, the old man painstakingly washing shop windows, the landscape crew planting trees along a new boulevard. He saw their focus, their skill, their quiet dignity. He saw his mother in every one of them. He ended up outside Tia Rosa's small, brightly painted house. The lights were on. He could see the silhouette of his mother through the kitchen window, sitting at the table, head bowed. He wanted nothing more than to go in, to fall at her feet and beg for forgiveness. But the weight of the letter, of his actions, held him back. Empty words would mean nothing. He had destroyed something precious. He could not simply ask for it back. He had to rebuild it. And he had no idea how. The ride home was a journey into the heart of a silence so complete it had a physical weight, pressing against Leo's eardrums. The Fiesta's usual rattles felt like gunshots. He stared out the window, watching the manicured estates around Silverwood give way to the modest, well-kept bungalows of their neighborhood, and finally to the aging brick facade of their apartment building. The fortress of his lies was now rubble, and he sat in the ruins, cold and exposed. Elena did not cry. She did not yell. She drove with a terrifying calm, her hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. When she parked and turned off the engine, the sudden quiet was deafening. Inside the apartment, she went straight to the small balcony where she kept her potted herbs, rosemary, thyme, cilantro struggling in the autumn chill. She began to tend to them, her back to him. It was her place of solace. Leo hovered in the living room, the words he had spoken at school now echoing back at him with their full, ugly force. This is what people do when they have no other choices. He saw again the light dying in her eyes. Mom, he began, his voice a croak. She didn't turn around. Go and wash up, Leo, she said, her voice flat, stripped of its melody. You smell of mulch. It was the most dismissive thing she had ever said to him. He retreated to the bathroom, scrubbing at the dirt under his nails, watching the brown water swirl down the drain, wishing he could wash away the last 3 hours just as easily. That night, for the first time he could remember, she did not cook. There were no comforting smells from the kitchen. She heated a can of soup and placed a bowl silently in front of him at the table before taking her own to her room and closing the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was a full stop. The next week was an exercise in desolation. Elena spoke to him only when necessary, in brief, functional sentences. Your laundry is on your bed. The rent is due Friday. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, her warmth absent. She worked longer hours, leaving before he woke and returning after he was often in his room. The home that had always been a refuge of unconditional love was now just a set of walls. At school, the fallout was different but just as severe. Asher was distant, his usual easy banter replaced with a cool, disapproving politeness. Chloe avoided him entirely. The story, of course, had spread. The scholarship kid who had publicly eviscerated his own mother, a hard-working woman, for her honest job. Whispers followed him in the halls. The looks were no longer of casual indifference but of active contempt. His social capital, built so painstakingly over 2 years, had evaporated overnight. He was a pariah, and he knew he deserved it. His only solace was the library, a cavernous, silent space where he could hide. It was there, 3 days after Community Impact Day, that he found the letter. It was tucked into his assigned ethics textbook, a plain envelope with his name written in his mother's graceful, looping script. His heart hammered against his ribs. He took it to the most isolated Carl and, with trembling hands, opened it. Leo, I am writing this because I cannot find the words to say to your face. The hurt is too close, and I fear my anger would say things I do not mean. What you said at your school did not surprise me. The wound of it did, deeply, but the sentiment. I have seen it growing in you for years. Every time you flinched from my kiss, every time you asked me to drop you a block away, every time you spun a story about my life to your friends, I felt it. I told myself it was just a phase, that you were navigating a world very different from our own. I told myself your love for me was underneath, like the roots of my plants, strong even if not seen. But on Friday, you showed me what you truly think of my life. Of my hands, of the work that put food in your mouth, clothes on your back, and yes, paid for the application fee to that very school. You called it unimportant. You said it was for people with no choices. Let me tell you about choices, mijo. I chose to leave my home, my family, my language, to come to this country when I was not much older than you are now. I chose to work 3 jobs so I could take night classes to improve my English. I chose to stand on my feet for 12 hours a day in a factory so I could afford a safer apartment when I found out I was pregnant with you. I chose to clean office buildings at night so I could be home with you during the day when you were small. I chose to take the job with Green Thumb because it allowed me to work outside, to make things grow, and to have a schedule that let me attend every one of your parent-teacher meetings at your old school. Every single day of my life has been a choice for you. A choice to give you a better chance. A choice to feed you not just food, but dignity and hope. The work I do is honest. It is skilled. It makes the world more beautiful and functional. It is a testament to perseverance. There is no shame in it. The only shame is in denying the love and sacrifice that fuels it. You are ashamed of me. But now, Leo, I must tell you a harder truth. I am ashamed of you. Not for being poor, not for being on scholarship, but for the poverty of your character. For the lack of compassion in your heart. For your belief that a person's worth is tied to their title or their bank account. I love you. You are my son, my Corazon, and that will never change. But I do not like the person you are becoming. And I cannot, and will not, stand by and be treated with contempt by my own child. Until you can look at me, and at yourself, and see the truth, we have nothing more to say. Do not expect the meals, the ironed clothes, the easy love. Those are for family who see each other, who respect each other. You have shown me I am not that to you. So I will stop being it. The apartment is paid through the month. There is food in the refrigerator. I will be staying with Tia Rosa for a while. Elena, the letter was not signed. Mom, it was signed. Elena. Leo read it 3 times. The words blurred, swimming in the tears he could no longer hold back. They fell onto the paper, smudging the ink of her name. A great, wrenching sob tore from his chest, there in the silent library. He clamped a hand over his mouth, his shoulders shaking. It was not a cry of self-pity, but of utter, devastating comprehension. He had not just insulted his mother, he had invalidated her entire life, her every struggle, her every triumph of spirit over circumstance. He had taken her boundless love and used it as a cloth to polish his own fragile ego. He was not just ashamed. He was disgusted with himself. He did not go home that night. He walked for hours, through neighborhoods both rich and poor, seeing the workers he had always invisibilized, the woman sorting recycling in the dim light of a truck, the old man painstakingly washing shop windows, the landscape crew planting trees along a new boulevard. He saw their focus, their skill, their quiet dignity. He saw his mother in every one of them. He ended up outside Tia Rosa's small, brightly painted house. The lights were on. He could see the silhouette of his mother through the kitchen window, sitting at the table, head bowed. He wanted nothing more than to go in, to fall at her feet and beg for forgiveness. But the weight of the letter, of his actions, held him back. Empty words would mean nothing. He had destroyed something precious. He could not simply ask for it back. He had to rebuild it. And he had no idea how. The next morning, Leo went to school, but not as his former self. The camouflage was gone. He walked through the gates with his head up, not in defiance, but in acceptance. He met the stares, the whispers, and absorbed them. He deserved them. In his ethics class, Mr. Donovan, a young, idealistic teacher, was facilitating a reflection on Community Impact Day. I've heard some challenging experiences arose, he said, his gaze lingering thoughtfully on Leo. These moments of discomfort can be our greatest teachers. Who would like to share? Several students spoke about humbling experiences, about appreciating their own privilege. Asher talked about the surprising artistry in landscaping. Chloe spoke quietly about the strength she saw in the people they worked alongside. Then Leo raised his hand. The room grew still. Every eye was on him. My experience, he began, his voice rough but clear, was a failure. But not of the day. It was a failure of character. I was assigned to work with my mother, who was a groundskeeper with Green Thumb. And I was ashamed of her. I was so deeply ashamed that I had spent 2 years lying about her, about my life, to all of you. He heard a sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the room. On that day, in my own shame and panic, I said something cruel to her. I devalued her work, her life, her choices. I told her it was what people did when they had no other options. He paused, looking down at his own hands on the desk. They were soft, students' hands. I was wrong. My mother has had nothing but choices her entire life. Hard, brutal, painful choices. And every single one, she made for me. To come here, to work jobs that break her body but not her spirit, to give me a chance at a place like this. Her work isn't unimportant. It is foundational. It's the work that holds everything else up. And I was too busy trying to climb onto the roof to see the strength of the foundation I was standing on. He looked up, meeting Mr. Donovan's gaze, then sweeping it across the room. I am not asking for your forgiveness. That's not yours to give. I am telling you this because the person I have been is someone I am deeply sorry for. And I am telling you so that if any of you have ever felt that same shame for someone who loves you, who works with their hands to build your world, you might think twice before you make my mistake. It's a mistake that costs you your soul. He sat down. The silence was absolute for a long moment. Then Mr. Donovan, his own eyes looking suspiciously bright, said softly, "Thank you for your honesty, Leo." That took immense courage. After class, Asher and Chloe approached him. Asher scratched the back of his head. "Look, man, that was heavy. And, I get it. I mean, I don't. My parents are ridiculous, but, I'm sorry I gave you such a hard time after. It was just shocking." Chloe was more direct. "You were a real jerk, Leo. But what you just said in there, that's the guy we thought we were friends with. Is your mom okay?" "No," Leo said honestly. "I hurt her badly. I don't know if she'll ever be okay with me again." "You have to try," Chloe said simply. He knew she was right. But the letter was clear. Words were not enough. He had to demonstrate change. He had to do something. The idea came to him that afternoon in the library, not as a flash of inspiration, but as a slow, dawning understanding. He was looking at architectural folios, grand designs for museums, skyscrapers, bridges. They were testaments to ambition, to reaching for the sky. But what was the first thing any architect needed to understand? The ground, the site, the foundation. His mother worked with the ground. She understood foundations in the most literal, physical sense. What if he could bridge his world with hers? Not with an apology, but with a project. A testament to her work, her knowledge, her world. He spent the next week in a fever of research and planning, fueled by a desperate hope. He skipped social gatherings he wasn't invited to anyway and used every spare moment. He went to the public library downtown, far from Silverwood, and checked out books on horticulture, landscape design, and community gardening. He learned about native plant species, about sustainable irrigation, about how gardens could transform not just spaces, but people. He discovered that his mother's employer, Green Thumb, also managed a few small, neglected community garden plots in the less affluent neighborhood near their old apartment. One of them, the Riverside plot, was a derelict, trash-strewn patch of land that had been abandoned. An idea crystallized. It was audacious, probably impossible, but it was all he had. He requested a meeting with Headmaster Whitaker. Sitting in the opulent office with its dark wood and leather, Leo felt a new kind of nervousness, not of being found out, but of failing to communicate something vital. "Headmaster Whitaker, my community impact day was transformative," Leo began, choosing his words with care. "It exposed a failure in me, but it also revealed an opportunity, for me, and perhaps for the school. I understand Silverwood wants to deepen its community engagement." He laid out his proposal. He wanted to design and build a revitalized community garden at the Riverside plot as his senior legacy project. But it wouldn't be a Silverwood project done for the community, it would be a collaborative effort with the community. He would need partners. The city's parks department, Green Thumb Landscaping for expertise and materials, and the residents of the neighborhood. He would use his architectural skills to design functional, beautiful, and sustainable spaces, raised beds for elders, a sensory garden for children, a composting system. But the knowledge, the labor, the heart of it, would come from the community itself. And, Leo said, his throat tight, I have requested, if they agree, that the on-site supervisor for the horticultural and community liaison work be Elena Mercer. She knows plants, she knows that neighborhood, and she knows the value of work that roots a community. Headmaster Whitaker listened, steepling his fingers. He had heard, of course, about the incident. He saw the raw, determined honesty in the boy before him now, so different from the polished, anxious scholarship student of before. This is a significant undertaking, Leo. It would require planning permissions, fundraising, liability waivers. It's a 2-semester project, minimum. I know, sir. I have preliminary sketches, a project plan, and a list of potential community partners. I'm not asking the school to fund it. I'm asking for your endorsement, for it to be my official senior project, and for the use of the school's name to help open doors. I will secure the funding and the permissions myself. Whitaker was quiet for a long moment. And Mrs. Mercer, has she agreed? Leo looked down. No, sir, I haven't asked her yet. I wanted to see if the idea had merit first. And, I'm afraid she'll say no. The headmaster leaned back in his chair. The project has considerable merit. It aligns perfectly with our renewed focus on ethical, collaborative engagement. You have my conditional endorsement. The condition is that you secure Mrs. Mercer's participation. Without her, it is just another student project. With her, it has the potential to be something genuine. I will have my office draft a letter of support. Leo left the office with a trembling sense of possibility. The first, most impossible hurdle, institutional buy-in, was cleared. Now, came the harder part, facing his mother. Leo didn't go to Tia Rose's. He knew a doorstep plea would put her on the spot. Instead, he wrote another letter. This one took him a dozen drafts, written late into the night at the kitchen table of the empty, echoing apartment. Querida Mama, I have no right to ask you for anything. I know this. The words I said to you are a stain on my heart that will never fully fade. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I am writing to ask for your help. I have been given a chance to do a senior project. I want to design and rebuild the old Riverside Community Garden. But I don't want to just design it on paper. I want to build it, with and for the people who live there. I have the architectural ideas. But I lack the real, living knowledge. The knowledge of the soil, of what will grow and thrive there, of how to make a space that welcomes people, not just impresses them. I lack your knowledge, Mama. I lack your heart. I am not asking you to do this for me. I am asking you to consider doing it for that piece of land, and for that community. The school has agreed to support it only if you are willing to be the horticultural supervisor and community liaison. They see what I was too blind to see, that your expertise is what would make it real, and honest, and true. I have attached the project outline, my initial sketches, and the letter from Headmaster Whitaker. If you say no, I will understand, and I will tell the school the project is untenable. There would be no point without you. Whatever you decide, I want you to know this. I see you now. I see the architect you are, of living, growing things. I see the strength of your hands and the depth of your love. I am ashamed of what I did, but I am no longer ashamed of you. I am in awe of you. And I am so desperately sorry. To Leo, he mailed the packet, along with a single, perfect white rose he bought from a florist with money from his own after-school stockroom job, a new development, its thorn carefully wrapped. For 3 days, there was no response. He went to school, worked his job, came home to the silent apartment, and waited. The hope that had flared began to dim. On the 4th evening, as he was eating a sad bowl of cereal for dinner, there was a knock at the door. His heart leapt into his throat. He opened it. Elena stood there. She looked tired, but the hollow look was gone from her eyes. In its place was a weary, guarded calm. She held his project packet in her hands. Can I come in? She asked. He nodded, stepping back, unable to speak. She walked in, glancing around at the slightly untidy space, his laundry in a basket, textbooks piled on the couch. She didn't comment. She sat at the small kitchen table, the same seat she'd occupied for 1,000 meals. Leo remained standing, like a supplicant. She placed the packet on the table. This, she said, tapping the sketches. The raised beds here, with the gentle slope for wheelchairs and for older backs, this is good thinking. And the compost system integrated with the tool shed, practical. Leo's breath caught. She was talking about the work. But this pergola here, she continued, pointing. You have it covered in wisteria. It is beautiful, but wisteria is aggressive. It would need constant cutting back, and its roots could disturb the foundation of the seating area within a few years. In that spot, with that much sun, a native clematis or even a hardy grapevine would be better. Less showy, but more sustainable for a community that needs low maintenance. It was a critique. A professional, knowledgeable critique. It was the most beautiful thing Leo had ever heard. She was engaging with him, not as her penitent son, but as a collaborator who had presented a flawed plan. You're right, he breathed. I didn't think of that. I was just thinking of the picture. A garden is not a picture, she said, her voice softening a fraction. It is a relationship, with the earth, with the weather, with the people who tend it. She looked up at him finally, her dark eyes meeting his. This project, it is a good idea, Leo. A true one, not a performance. It can't be true without you, Mama, he said, the words slipping out, fraught with all his hope and fear. She was silent for a long moment, studying his face, seeing the dark circles under his eyes, the new lines of worry and purpose on his forehead. She saw the boy she loved, wounded and trying, clumsily, to find his way back. I will do it, she said finally. Not for you, for the garden, for Senora Garcia, who used to grow the best tomatoes there before it went to weeds. For the children who have no green space to play in. But, she held up a finger, and the mother's authority was back in her voice but, she repeated, her gaze unwavering, you will work. Not as the boss, not as the designer giving orders. You will work as my apprentice. You will listen more than you speak. You will get blisters. You will come home smelling of soil and sweat. And you will be there for every meeting, every phone call to the city, every time we have to convince a neighbor that this is for them, not just a school project to make Silverwood look good. Entiendes? Yes, Leo said, the word thick with emotion. Yes, I understand. Thank you, Mama. Do not thank me yet, she said, but the ghost of a smile touched the corner of her mouth. The work thanks the worker, or it does not. We will see. She stood to leave. At the door, she paused. The rose was a nice thought. But next time, bring a seedling. Something that can grow. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Leo stood in the middle of the room, a torrent of relief, fear, and determination crashing through him. She had said yes, not to forgiveness, but to a chance. It was a start. It was everything. The Riverside Community Garden project began not with a ribbon cutting, but with a cleanup. On a cold, bright Saturday morning in November, Leo stood beside his mother in the derelict lot. It was worse than his sketches had conveyed. A tangle of brittle weeds, choked with fast food wrappers, broken bottles, and the skeletal remains of old chain link fencing. Elena had been true to her word. She was not there as his mother, but as Supervisor Mercer. She had secured donated gloves, trash bags, and tools from Green Thumb. She had also done the true groundwork. She had knocked on doors in the surrounding apartments, spoken to the community center, and recruited the first volunteers. A small, curious group gathered, an elderly Latino man named Mr. Ortiz, who remembered the garden in its prime, a young Somali mother, Fatima, with two toddlers clinging to her legs, and a trio of bored-looking teenagers from the local high school, drafted by a community service requirement. Elena addressed them all, her voice carrying easily in the crisp air. Good morning. Thank you for coming. This land belongs to all of us. Today, we are not building yet. First, we must clear away what does not belong. We must see the earth again. Vamos Olympiar. She assigned tasks with a quiet efficiency that brooked no argument. The teenagers, with their youthful strength, were put on hauling duty. Mr. Ortiz was given a rake and a chair to work from. Fatima and Leo were put on weeding detail. Leo knelt in the dirt beside his mother. She showed him how to grip the weed at its base, feel for the root, and pull with a steady, firm pressure to get it all. His first few attempts snapped the stems, leaving the roots behind. They will just grow back stronger, Elena said, not unkindly. You must be patient. You must be complete. He slowed down, mimicking her method. The sun climbed, and despite the chill, he began to sweat under his layers. His knees ached. His lower back protested. Next to him, his mother worked with a steady, rhythmic pace that seemed indefatigable. He watched her hands, those familiar, calloused hands, moving with certainty, clearing a small patch of dark, rich soil. It was a kind of magic. At one point, Asher and Chloe showed up, looking uncertain in brand new, spotless work clothes. Leo had told them about the project, but he hadn't asked them to come. Their appearance was a shock. We heard this was where the hard work was, Asher said, attempting his usual grin, though it faltered as he took in the scale of the mess. Chloe elbowed him. We wanted to help, if that's okay. Leo looked at his mother. Elena appraised them for a moment, then nodded. Gloves are in the box. You can start bagging the trash those three are hauling over. It was menial work, and she gave it to them without ceremony. As the day wore on, something shifted. The initial awkwardness melted under shared effort. Mr. Ortiz began telling stories of the giant zucchinis he used to grow. Fatima's children started a game of chasing earthworms, their shrieks of laughter filling the air. The teenagers, initially sullen, started competing to see who could carry the heaviest load. Asher, covered in a fine layer of dust, declared bagging trash weirdly satisfying. Chloe sat with Mr. Ortiz during a water break, listening intently to his advice on soil pH. Leo, taking a break to drink from a water jug, watched his mother conferring with Fatima, pointing at the sun's path across the lot. She was in her element, commanding, knowledgeable, connecting. He felt a surge of pride so sharp it was painful. This was who she was. And he had been blind to it. At the end of the day, the lot was not transformed, but it was revealed. The trash was gone. The worst of the weeds were cleared, piled into a mountain for composting. The shape of the land was visible. They stood together, a tired, dirty, little group, looking at their handiwork. It looks bigger, one of the teenagers observed. It looks possible, Mr. Ortiz corrected, a smile cracking his withered face. Elena addressed them all. This is the first step. The most important one. You have shown this land respect. Now it will begin to trust us. Thank you, all of you. Next week, we stake out the beds. As the volunteers dispersed, Asher clapped Leo on the back. Your mom is, kind of terrifyingly competent, man. Yeah, Leo said, watching her pack tools into her truck. She is. Chloe smiled at him, a real, warm smile for the first time in weeks. This is a good thing you're doing, Leo. It didn't feel like he was doing it. It felt like he was finally catching up to something his mother had known how to do all along. The project became the axis around which Leo's life rotated. Weekends were for physical work at the garden. Evenings and weekdays were for the endless logistics. Securing donated lumber for the raised beds from a local hardware store, navigating the city's permit office with Alina's translations and steely patience, designing and redesigning the layout based on the community's input. Elena was a demanding teacher. She rejected his first, beautifully drafted architectural plan for the shed as wasteful and fancy. It is a shed, Leo, not a cathedral. It needs to be strong, simple, and easy to repair. Use the standard dimensions for plywood sheets. No custom cuts. He learned to design with practicality and cost at the forefront. He learned that the most elegant solution was often the simplest one that served the people using it. Their relationship at the site was strictly professional, but the ice was slowly melting. They communicated in shorthand about load bearing and drainage, about sunlight hours and foot traffic patterns. They disagreed, sometimes heatedly. He wanted a modern, geometric layout for the herb garden. She insisted on a traditional, circular jardin de hierbas with a central sundial salvaged from a junkyard. People understand a circle, she said. It feels communal. Your angles feel like a maze. He fought for his design, but in the end, he deferred. He was learning to listen. At home, a fragile new normal emerged. She moved back into the apartment, though the ease was gone. They were polite, careful roommates more than mother and son. But she started cooking again, simple, hearty meals after their long days. They would eat, often in tired silence, but it was no longer a hostile one. Sometimes, they would spread the garden plans over the cleared table, and she would point out something with a grease-stained finger. Here, the runoff from the roof should go into a rain barrel, not the storm drain. We can use it to water. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day dealing with a delayed concrete delivery, Leo broke the last rule of their unspoken truce. He asked a personal question. Mama, he started, his voice tentative in the quiet kitchen. Why did you never remarry? Or go back to school? You're so smart, you could have done anything. He braced for her to shut him down, to remind him this was a professional collaboration. Elena put down her knife, her gaze on the onion she was chopping. She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. I did do something, she said finally, her voice soft. I raised you. That was my choice. And it was not a small thing. It was my great work. She looked up at him, her eyes clear. And I am not done learning. I am learning about grant writing for this garden. I am learning about native pollinator species. A degree on a wall is one kind of smart. Knowing how to make life grow from dirt, how to keep a child safe and loved with very little, that is another. Do not confuse them. It was not an accusation, just a statement of fact. But it landed with the weight of truth. Leo had spent his life bettering the first kind of smart and dismissing the second. He saw now that his mother's intelligence was vast, deep, and applied, the most powerful kind there was. The garden began to take shape. The raised beds, built by their own hands under Mr. Ortiz's watchful eye, stood in neat, hopeful rows. The compost bins, a three-chambered system Leo had designed, began to fill with garden waste and coffee grounds collected from a local cafe. The Silverwood connection, once a source of shame for Leo, became a practical asset. He gave a presentation to the Silverwood board, not about architecture, but about food security and community cohesion. To his astonishment, they approved a small grant. Chloe organized a bake sale that raised money for tools. Asher got his father's company to donate funds for a durable irrigation system. The community, initially hesitant, began to claim ownership. Fatima planted her first rows of corn and beans, a traditional Somali mix she called Michelin. Mr. Ortiz nurtured a bed of chilies and tomatoes. The teenagers, who now came voluntarily, built a sturdy picnic table. The garden was becoming a mosaic of the neighborhood itself. One afternoon in early spring, while they were planting the first seedlings, lettuce, kale, peas, Alina's phone rang. She listened, her expression growing tense. "Sí, entiendo, ahora voy," she hung up. "It is Senora Garcia, from the third floor. Her pipe has burst. She is panicking. I must go. I'll finish here," Leo said automatically. Elena hesitated, looking at the delicate seedlings and the careful planting plan. It was detailed work. She met his eyes, a silent question in hers. "I know how, Mama," he said quietly. "You showed me. The depth is twice the size of the root ball. Firm the soil gently, water deeply." A look passed between them, complex, layered with the memory of his past failures and the evidence of his recent diligence. She gave a single, sharp nod. "Do not rush." Then she was gone, driving off to handle another crisis. Leo worked slowly, meticulously, the way she had taught him. He felt a profound sense of responsibility. She trusted him with the seedlings. It was a small thing, but it felt immense. When Asher and Chloe arrived later, they found him on his knees, covered in dirt, carefully spacing out a row of sugar snap peas. "Dude, your mom lets you do this alone?" Asher asked, impressed. "She had to go help a neighbor," Leo said, sitting back on his heels. "And yeah, she trusts me to do it right." Chloe smiled. "You're different out here, Leo. You seem real." He was. For the first time, he felt integrated. The pieces of himself, the son, the student, the aspiring architect, were no longer at war. They were being woven together by the simple, demanding act of caring for something outside himself. Progress was not linear. In early April, a late frost was forecast. Elena called an emergency meeting at the garden after dusk. The core group gathered under the beam of her truck's headlights, their breath fogging in the icy air. "We have to cover everything," she said, her voice tense. "The tomatoes, the peppers, the beans. All the tender seedlings. If we lose them, we are weeks behind." They scrambled. They used old bed sheets, cardboard boxes, burlap sacks donated from a coffee roaster. Leo and the teenagers worked to build makeshift tents using PVC pipes and plastic sheeting. It was frantic, cold work. Fatima arrived with her 2 sleeping children bundled in a wagon, handing out thermoses of sweet, spiced tea. As the temperature plummeted, they kept working. Leo's fingers grew numb. He saw his mother, a silhouette against the headlights, moving with urgent grace, tucking a sheet around Mr. Ortiz's precious chili plants as if putting a child to bed. Finally, near midnight, it was done. The garden looked like a ghost town of lumpy, shrouded shapes. Exhausted, they huddled by the truck, drinking the last of the tea. "Will it be enough?" Leo asked, his teeth chattering. Elena looked up at the clear, starry sky, a sure sign of a hard freeze. "We have done what we can. The rest is up to the plants, and the earth." She put a hand on Mr. Ortiz's shoulder. "Vamos, viejo, you need to get inside." "We all do." The next morning, Leo was at the garden by sunrise. He was not alone. The whole group had silently reconvened, drawn by a shared anxiety. Together, they peeled back the covers. There was damage. Some of the outermost bean leaves were tinged with black, wilted. A few pepper plants looked stunned. A collective groan went up. But as they moved inward, they found more and more that had survived. The tomatoes, protected by the most careful tenting, stood green and firm. The peas, hardy souls, were untouched. The herbs in their circular bed were fragrant and vibrant. "We saved most of it," Fatima said, her voice filled with wonder. Mr. Ortiz knelt by his chilies. "This one is hurt," he said, pointing to a frostbitten stem. But see here, a new shoot is already coming from the base. It is stronger. Elena walked through the rows, assessing. She stopped by a bed of lettuce, its outer leaves frost-nipped but the heart still crisp. She looked around at their tired, worried faces, and she smiled. It was the full, sunrise smile Leo hadn't seen directed at him in months. But it was for all of them. This is gardening, she announced. You do everything right, and still, the frost comes. You mourn what is lost, and you celebrate what survived. And you learn. Next year, we start these even later. Or we build a proper cold frame. She put her hands on her hips, surveying their work. We did well. Gracias a to-dos. The near disaster bonded them more than any success could have. They had fought for their garden together, and they had mostly won. The garden was no longer just a project. It was their shared charge, their vulnerable, thriving piece of common ground. A week later, Leo came home to find the table set for two, with the good plates, the ones with the blue border that only came out for birthdays. A pot of rich mole simmered on the stove, its complex, chocolate and chili scent filling the apartment. What's the occasion? He asked, wary. Elena turned from the stove. The occasion is that I am tired of eating in silence with my son. And I made mole. Sit. They ate. The silence was different now, comfortable, punctuated by the simple sounds of a shared meal. Halfway through, Elena spoke. The grant report is due next week. I have written the first draft, but my English for bureaucracy, it is not good. Will you look at it? It was a request for help. Not for her son, but for a partner. It was an acknowledgement of a skill he had that she needed. Of course, Leo said, his heart swelling. In your university applications, she said, not looking up from her plate. The deadlines are soon. No. He had put them off, mired in the garden and in a newfound uncertainty about what he even wanted. Yeah, I haven't finished them. You should, she said simply. You have a good mind for building things. This garden, it shows that. You just needed to learn what you were building for. She finally met his gaze. I am proud of this work we are doing, Leo. It wasn't, I forgive you. It wasn't, I'm proud of you. But it was, I am proud of this work we are doing. It was a shared pride, earned through blisters and frost and corrected designs. It was, for now, enough. More than enough. It was a foundation. By high summer, the Riverside Community Garden was a tapestry of abundance. Sunflowers stood like happy sentinels, their heads nodding heavily. Fatima's corn rustled in the breeze, tall and strong. Mr. Ortiz's tomatoes were a scandal of red and orange orbs. The circular herb garden was a buzzing hub for bees and butterflies. The picnic table was rarely empty. It had become a place where neighbors shared coffee, traded recipes, and simply sat in the green shade. The official opening ceremony was set for a Saturday in July. Headmaster Whitaker was coming, along with local council members and the press. Leo had a speech prepared, full of architectural theory and community metrics. The morning of the ceremony, he found his mother in the garden before anyone else arrived. She was not in her uniform, but in a simple, beautiful dress the color of lavender, a gift from Tia Rosa. She was walking slowly along the paths, her fingers brushing the leaves of the plants as if in blessing. Nervous? Leo asked, joining her. A little, she admitted. This is not for them, you know. The men in suits. This is for Mr. Ortiz, who has smiled more this summer than in the last 5 years. For Fatima's children, who know now that food comes from the earth, not just a plastic package. That is the harvest that matters. The ceremony began. The lot, once a symbol of neglect, was now filled with people, color, and life. Headmaster Whitaker gave a polished speech about civic engagement. A councilwoman cut a ribbon. Then it was Leo's turn. He stood at the front, holding his note cards. He looked out at the crowd, at Asher and Chloe grinning from the back, at the stoic faces of the Green Thumb crew, at the beaming, proud faces of Mr. Ortiz, Fatima, and the teenagers. And he saw his mother, standing slightly apart, her hands clasped in front of her, watching him. He put the note cards in his pocket. A year ago, he began, his voice finding its strength. I stood in a different garden, at my school, and I said something I will regret for the rest of my life. I devalued the work of my mother, Elena Mercer. I thought that important work happened in offices with glass walls, or in lecture halls. I was wrong. He saw his mother's posture soften, her eyes glistening. This garden, he continued, gesturing around him, is not my design. Not really. It is the design of the people who live here. It is the design of necessity, of memory, of culture. My job was just to listen, and to help translate those needs into wood and soil and pipe. The real architect of this space is standing right there. He pointed to his mother. She is the one who knows that a garden is a conversation. That you don't impose a plan, you coax a possibility from the land and the community. She taught me that the strongest foundation isn't concrete, it's trust. That the most beautiful design isn't the most impressive, but the most useful. That the true measure of success isn't what you take, but what you help to grow. He looked directly at her. Mama, you have spent your life building a world for me to grow in. This garden is my first, small attempt to help build a world worthy of you. Thank you for teaching me how. There was a moment of perfect silence, broken only by the buzz of a bee. Then Mr. Ortiz began to clap, a slow, deliberate applause. Fatima joined in, then the teenagers, then the whole crowd, rising to their feet. Headmaster Whitaker nodded, a look of deep approval on his face. Elena Mercer did not applaud. She walked through the crowd towards her son. When she reached him, she cupped his face in her hands, her rough, beloved palms warm against his skin. She looked into his eyes, and he saw the love there, not just restored, but deepened, strengthened by the trials they had weathered. Hio, she whispered, her voice thick. You have learned, you have grown. She pulled him into a tight embrace, there in front of everyone. This time, Leo did not flinch. He held her tightly, breathing in the familiar sense of soap, soil, and her, burying his face in her shoulder. The applause washed over them, but it was just noise. The only thing that mattered was the solid, real, unbreakable truth of her arms around him. The story did not end with a perfect reconciliation or a fairy tale reversal. Some scars remained, tender places in their relationship that they both knew to tread lightly around. Leo's shame had left its mark on them both. But it was no longer a wall, it was a landmark they had passed, a reminder of a path not to be taken again. Leo finished his university applications, choosing schools with strong architecture and urban design programs, but also with community outreach focuses. His portfolio was no longer just renderings of sleek buildings, it was filled with sketches of the riverside garden, diagrams of the compost system, and before and after photos that told a story of transformation. He wrote his personal statement about foundations, both literal and metaphorical. He was accepted to his first choice school, with a significant financial aid package. The night the letter came, Elena cried, not the quiet tears of hurt from before, but proud, joyful tears. She framed the letter and put it on the mantelpiece, right next to a photo of the two of them at the garden opening, covered in dirt and smiling. The garden thrived. It became a permanent, self-sustaining part of the neighborhood. A committee was formed, with Elena as its honorary president, though she refused any title. Mr. Ortiz took over the tomato mentorship for new gardeners. The teenagers started a small business selling herb bundles at the local farmers market. On the day Leo left for college, they stood one last time in the garden. It was late August, and the air was heavy with the scent of ripe fruit and warm earth. The sunflowers were beginning to bow, their seeds ready for the birds, and for saving for next year's planting. It will be strange to not have you here, getting underfoot, Elena said, her eyes scanning the familiar, beloved rose. You'll have more time for your own projects, Leo said. That grant writing class starts next week, right? She nodded. See, and maybe a small orchard in the empty lot on Elm Street. The city is interested. He looked at her, this woman who had crossed borders, battled loneliness, raised a child alone on back-breaking work, and still had the strength to dream of orchards. His heart ached with a love so fierce it was almost painful. I'm sorry, Mama, he said, the words finally finding their true shape, unburdened by desperation or hope for absolution. For all of it, she reached out and took his hand, lacing her calloused fingers through his. I know, Corazon, and I am sorry, too. He looked at her, puzzled. I am sorry I let you believe, even for a second, that you had to choose between loving me and loving the world you wanted to be a part of. I should have shown you sooner that you could carry both. That we are not so fragile. He shook his head. No, I had to learn that for myself. You were always showing me. I just wasn't looking. She smiled, the sunrise smile, full and warm and just for him. She pulled him into a hug. You will call. You will come home for harvest. And you will send me your drawings. I will. He got into the second-hand car he'd bought with his summer earnings. As he drove away, he looked in the rearview mirror. He saw his mother, not watching him leave, but already turning back to her garden. She knelt by a bed, her lavender dress a splash of color against the green, and began to tend to something with her gentle, capable hands. He drove towards his future, towards classrooms that would teach him to build skyscrapers and bridges. But he knew now that the most important thing he would ever build was the bond that had been tested, broken, and rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful for its scars. It was the unbreakable thread woven from honesty, hard work, and a love as deep and nurturing as the soil itself. He carried it with him, a living root in his heart, connecting him always to the woman who had taught him that true strength grows not from what you take, but from what you are willing to get on your knees and tend.